Okay, thank you very much for the organizers to invite me. I mean, not invent me, to invite me. I think in the former presentations already a couple of items I want to touch on, especially Bruno, Mirka, and Anna I already mentioned. So my question actually is, can we use multisport to prevent injuries, right? And next slide, please. And this is already seen by Anna and Mirka, actually emphasized that we have school-age children are less fitter and less skilled in the last, well, actually from the 1980s on, from the last century. And there are different reasons for that, of course. I think one of the reasons is playing less outside, maybe less quality in PE teaching in primary schools, or no teachers at all for the PE teaching. But I also want to emphasize, next slide please, that it's not only, and it touches on Bruno's aspects actually, that there's also not only not moving to enough, but also to moving too unilateral. And I think moving too one-sided, too always doing the same thing, is also, I think, one of the major problems we're facing. Next slide, please. While we know, on the other hand, there is some evidence, retrospective studies, that top athletes actually they practice quite a large number of different sports. And I'm not using here the word sports, but our real meaning is that they're learning through the sports, many different skills, many fundamental skills, which actually is a use advantage later on. And there is a lot of evidence now that many of the top athletes, and I'm not only talking about top athletes, but the top athletes actually follow this path, this developmental path. Next slide, please. Here, this is like a textbook graph. And just I want to emphasize my point here. If you go to the left part, you see a small baby, and of course, then he learns all the skills. But if you end on the middle and the fundamental part, this should be happening with kids between 6 and 8 years old, normally. And they should actually acquire all the fundamental skills already and potential. And I think what happened actually is, next slide, please. And that part is quite often skipped because we specialize too early in one sport, in one direction, in one monotone way of practicing. And that has to do with also that parents emphasize they want to learn children to play very good tennis or to play very good judo. So they go learning all the skills from tennis, learning all the skills from judo. But by doing that, they're missing quite a lot of other fundamental skills, I think. And that part is skipped. Also as a result of playing less outside, the PE teaching. Some of the points mentioned by Anna and by Mirka already earlier in this small conference. Next slide, please. Here's some evidence that you're doing some different skills. If you see here on the scale is an MQ, and that means a motor coefficient. This is done by research from the University of Ghent, by Joop Franse. These are kids from 10 to 12 years old. And they studied children that did this coordination test. And they looked at children who did for 2 hours a single sport or for 6 hours a single sport, which is the ones here in red. And what you see there is that the children will do more hours spent on that sport, they score higher on the MQ scale. That makes perfectly sense. You practice more, and because of your practice, you're getting better. But then if you look to the green part, there's also the same, but these are children, the same age, but they do 2 or 3 sports. They did that practice for 2 hours a week or for 6 hours a week, and we actually see the same effect there, that if you practice more hours, you are better. But, next slide. Okay, this, I think, important finding here is the non-significant finding between the 6 hours and the 2 hours. And that means that in the quality of these training sessions, something different happened in a shorter time. And that can be maybe back to doing different sports. It can be back to Bruno's point from variability. It can be going back to that you learn more fundamental skills because you're doing these different sports. Next slide, please. So I think what was a nice model in this is the differentiation model of Chocolat already more than 20 years ago. We actually said from this perspective that you should take first the sampling years. And the sampling years is learning all these fundamental skills by doing maybe different sports, right? And then you actually went to the specializing years, which you do 2, 3, 4 sports. And then further on, you move to investment years where you really become like an athlete. Of course, these age groups are a little bit tricky. They're different for every sport. They're also quite close to the educational system. But if you move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. There you can see, this is also from the Coté model, but a little bit more filled in. You see actually, that was 20 years ago already a very good idea, I think, from him. So you see the sampling years, and what happen is that maybe a lot of parents push the kids too early to the right spot. Even they're not in the elite programs, they want to get them in the elite programs, and that's why they start this early specialization and investment. And a lot of people think that is the way to become an elite athlete. While the middle part is actually where there's quite evidence for now, right? From Australia, some studies, but also Gulick did some very nice analysis where you can see that actually the middle part is actually followed by the most athletes. On the other hand, the sampling years are very important because if not everybody gets a top athlete, but if you look to the left column, the recreational years, is more important for society and even more important for injury prevention, I think. Because if you learn this kind of different fundamental skills, there's a whole range in the years when you become older what you can do. Next slide, please. So for instance, this variability, we think we're doing throwing. So if you look to a baseball ball, you learn to throw a baseball. But of course, there are many ways of throwing. So even within one skill, you can put a lot of variation. Or again, by PE teaching or by using different sports, which covers all these kind of aspects. This is just one example to show how easy it can bring in variability. Next slide, please. This is a study which shows that from different sports in the age from 10 to 15 years, this is of course in the age of when we have the growth spurt, there is a 50% less chance on injury, they claim. And there's very a meta-analysis, the sport specialization, the risk of overuse injuries by Bell also showed that how more sport specialization, how higher the risk on overuse injuries. Next slide, please. So this is just a promotion chart from high school. But here you see some nice aspects come together. And what you see on the left again is specializing one sport very early, 46% is the claim on high school. This guy research from high school in the US. And 24 when you do multisports. And multisports is more or less the same by learning different fundamental movement skills. And then there's some other psychological aspects which I'm not going to right now. Please, next slide. And this is actually, I'm sorry, apologize for the Dutch, but this is actually a way you can analyze all sports in these 10 fundamental parts. We call it the fundamental 10. And this fundamental 10 should be in every program. And you can put this fundamental 10 even in one sport. Even if you specialize in one sport or doing only 2 sports, you can use all the fundamental 10s. And this is what teachers should learn to use this kind of programs. Next slide, please. And so, to sum up, we want healthy performance. And for healthy performance, we need fitness. And please, next press. And I think I'm really convinced that the diversification in movement, so doing different movements, using variability, using the non-linear pedagogic, also was mentioned by Bruno, I have no time to go into that, that will increase the quality of movement. You don't need to look always in the number of hours. And this will contribute to fitness. And if you have fitter, I think then you can have the performance on every level you want. Next slide, please. And this is one of the claims. More originally titled was about multi and donor sports, but in the 15 minutes I have absolutely no time to go into that. But with this model, we learn people to connect the fundamental movement skills to abilities in sport and coordination. And we claim that there will be a better performance based on this research, lesser injuries, and of course the psychological aspects. I didn't really mention our social aspects, but we know that a lot of kids when they're 12 year and 15 year, they drop out of sports. They're burned out already on that sport by doing always the same thing. So finally, my last slide. I think not only I showed that today, I think the presentation of Anna from America and also from Bruno support my suggestion.